In this video tutorial, I'll show you how to create a live coding environment for music using JavaScript. So you can change things on the fly. Change the synth. Yeah, let's get to it. In this tutorial, I'll be using Sublime Text. You can use that. Also open up Google Chrome as well. In a different window, just type in HTML5 doc type into Google and go to the first link, copy the code, paste it onto the editor. We will also be using two dependencies, Tone.js. Look for Tone.js CDN on Google and go to the first link, copy this, and paste it onto your browser or editor. And look for Ace Editor CDN. And copy the first link, paste it here. Okay, I'm just going to put both of these links inside a script tag. Okay, now I'm just going to save the file, call it test, and load it here. And there you go. Okay, these are the only two dependencies that we'll be using. Let's initialize the editor first. For that, I'm going to create a div called editor. Give it the ID. And now let's style this inside the head. We're going to make editor have a width of 100 and a height of 100. And whenever you do this, make sure that the HTML and body also have a width of 100 and a height of 100, or it won't work. So now let me just initialize it in code. Ace.edit. Editor is the ID that we gave it for the div. And we're going to make the editor have a theme of black. And we're going to set the mode of the editor to be JavaScript. And let's also make the font size a lot bigger. So let's make it 20 points. Now I'll save the file and I'll refresh it here. And there you go. That I'll add is the go button or a play button, because web audio needs you to interact with the website in order to work. So for that, I will just have an on-click event here that will run a function called go. Now let's style this button. Give it a width of 100, height of 30, and a border radius. And let me see how that looks. Okay, also I'll make the editor have a height of 100% minus the button's 30 pixels, so it won't bleed off the screen. And I'll also make the button centered, and I'll make the line height equal to the height so that it'll be vertically centered as well. So let me just refresh that. Also give it a margin of 5, which means I'll have to reduce another 10 because it's from the top and bottom. And I'll also make the go button hover have a different background color, and we'll make the pointer cursor be a pointer. So let me just refresh that, see how the pointer changed and the background color as well. Okay, let's just check that Tone.js works. Well, first let me just check that my go button works. Okay, now let me just create a little volume control here. And I'll connect it to the master. I will actually put this outside of the go button or function. And I will create a new polysynth with 3 voices. That means that we can have a chord of 3 notes if we wanted to. That's why you want to use a polysynth and not necessarily a regular synth. because if I had a regular synth like, then I wouldn't be able to play a chord basically. So always best to just use a polysynth. Volume, basically when you do to master, to master is almost like your speakers. So the volume just goes in between and has a volume of, well, right now I have -12, which is going to be a little bit lower, and a polysynth. Now the polysynth we want to connect to the volume. So now you could just think about this like a chain. So the polysynth is connected to the volume is connected to our speakers. Inside of our go function, we'll just play a note. So let's trigger attack release. This will be the note, and it'll go on for a 16th note. So now when we refresh this, we'll just make sure that it plays. Sounds good. Okay, so in addition to a synth, we also want a sampler. So let me just create that really quick. We'll have a kick. I'll have the link here. We'll have a snare, another link, and the hi-hat, and another link. Now, for these links, I'll show you a really cool trick. I'm just going to copy and paste this here. I'm using JS Deliver. It's an amazing service. What it does is it lets you link static files from either GitHub or NPM and use them as a CDN, basically in your code. So right now I'm just using, if you go to the Tone.js GitHub, you'll see that he has these folders, example audio. So I'm just going to use the kick from there. And same thing with the snare and the hi-hat. Snare, hi-hat. Once it's done loading, we get a callback here. You might need to do something here. I probably won't use it right now though, but maybe later. And now instead of the synth, what we'll do is we'll try to see if the samples work. So p1 dot get kick. They work in a slightly different way. You got to get the key first, and then you start it. So let's see if the kick works. Let me just save this, refresh this, and it does not work. Why? All right, it's because I never connected the sampler to the actual volume. So just like we did with polysynth.connect, we'll go p1.connect to volume. Save that, refresh that, play. See, the kick works. Let's try the snare. Save, refresh. Snare works. And the hi-hat. Okay, good. Okay, now I will be coding the meat and potatoes of this thing. If there's one thing to remember from this tutorial, it's this part. It's tone.sequence. This makes things so much easier. I'll explain exactly what this code does in a second. But basically, I will want to send it these values. And they will be in 1/8 notes. Does this look right? Yeah. And we will be evaluating our editor on each one. Okay, so let me just explain this code really quick. Tone.sequence is basically this this element that takes as a parameter an array, and for each value of the array, it runs this thing. Okay, so it's going to run it for 0, for 1, for 2, for 3, and every time I'm going to have this value inside IDX, and time is the current time of tone. So when I do an eval editor, editor.getValue will get the value of whatever the content is in the editor that we wrote. So whatever the value is here, it's going to eval it. Eval is just going to evaluate JavaScript. So inside this tone.sequence, another thing that we need is to start the transport. This basically starts the time of Tone.js, and it starts it within 20 seconds. This is like a little performance tweak. Sometimes it doesn't, there's like an issue where it doesn't play the first note. And we'll start our sequence as well. Another thing that we'll add here is the BPM. Just make it 120. And another good thing, it's good karma to put latency context latency hint is equal to fastest. It just makes things a little bit quicker, and we're doing things in real time, so we need things to be as quick as possible. Now, if you remember before, we triggered our hi-hat. So instead of triggering it inside the go, now we're going to trigger it. It's going to be inside the editor. So when I refresh the page, see how this code right here is inside our editor? Now let's see if it works. Nice. So what it's doing is it's playing our hi-hat every time one of these values gets triggered, and it gets triggered every 8th note to 120 BPM. So we kind of get this effect. And because it's evaluated at every time, I can also comment this out and just stop it like that. See? Okay, so let's now just create the drum part of our song inside of editor. In addition to the hi-hat being triggered at every point, let's also trigger the kick. But the kick won't be triggered on every sequence. What it will do is it will just wait until the index is either 0, 4, 8, or 12. And I'll show you what this sounds like in a second. But if it's one of those values, then we will play the kick. And the snare is similar, but for the snare, I will make it on different beats. So 2, 6, 10, and 14. Okay, so let's save that, refresh that, and let's see what it sounds like. See that? And the cool thing about this is because it's a live editor, I can change things on the fly. See? How cool is that? Okay, that was the drum part. Let's do the synth part right now. For this, I'll have a chord progression. Inside the chord progression, I'll have 4 chords. This will be the first chord. It's made up of these notes. C, E, G is the first chord of the C major scale. So I'm just gonna have, so for our 4 chords, do this 4 times, and every chord has a different set of notes. So this will be the 5 chord of the C major scale. And if you don't know music theory, I will be explaining more music theory because I think music is absolutely amazing, and it's so similar to coding that it's ridiculous. But this is the 6th chord, and this is the 4 chord. I'm just changing the note names, that's all. And this progression basically goes 1, 5, 6, 4. And this is a very famous chord progression. If you go to YouTube and type in the axis of awesome, you'll see a YouTube video that shows hundreds of songs that just use this chord progression. So it's very well known. So now, this is just a quick way to basically pick what chord we want to play. And it depends on the sequence index. So remember how we, for every value of this, we get this callback. So I'm not going to do it on every single value. I don't want to play my chord on every single value. What I'll do is that, so if the sequence is 0, If the index is 0, we're going to play the first chord. If it's 4, we're going to play the second chord. If it's 8, we're going to play the third chord. This is 0 based. So if this is 12, we're going to play the fourth chord. Okay? That's just the index of this array. Now we actually need to play it. So if chord index is greater than 0, meaning it got into any one of those if statements, then we're going to actually trigger the synthesizer. So trigger attack release. I'm going to go to that double dimension array here, and I'll play the first chord. I'll play the chord index, whatever we choose, and the first note of it. And I'll do this for, I'll explain this a little bit more in a second, but basically I'm going to do this for 3 notes, right? Because we have in our array, for each chord that is, we have 3 notes, right? So this is 0, 1, and 2. So for whatever chord we chose, we play its 3 notes. And this means that we're going to play it for a 16th note. That's the duration of whatever I play. So it's a very quick. And does this look right? Okay, let me just save this, and I'll refresh this. So this is our synth part. This is the drums. And let's see if it works. Yes. Awesome. So instead of the actual block chords, what I'll do is I'll arpeggiate the chords. So the third parameter means that it's gonna wait until it plays it, and this is for how long. It's gonna wait. Plus means from the current time. So it's gonna wait an 1/8 note before it triggers this, and it's gonna wait a 1/4 note before it triggers this one. Okay, so let's just try this out. I'll make the volume a little bit louder. So when we refresh it, it should arpeggiate it. Yeah. Nice. Okay, that was nice, but let's try to add some effects to it, and let's see what it sounds like with effects. So here I will add a reverb. Oops. It's called freeverb. And I'll just give it some random value here. And I'll connect it to from the reverb to the volume. And I'll also have a vibrato. These are some other values. I'll connect it to the reverb. And what else do we need? I think that's fine for now. And so, as I said before, this is a chain. So the vibrato goes to the reverb goes to the volume, and the synth, right? Instead of going directly to the volume, now we're gonna make it go to the vibrato. Same thing with the sampler. So remember the sampler that we had? This one needs to connect it to the vibrato now. So see how, well, let's put these two together. But see how both my synths and the sampler, they both connect to the vibrato. The vibrato then connects to the reverb connects to the volume, and it's good. Okay, so let me just save that, refresh it. Let's see what it sounds like. Not bad. I mean, there's a lot of things you gotta mess with to make this sound really good. Okay, so that was the basic functionality of what we need. Now we could just mess around with it in our live editor. So let's play it. And I can get rid of the hi-hat. Maybe get rid of the middle note. rid of the snare. So there you go. I mean, it's not like we're gonna get a music award on this anytime soon, but this is the basics. I mean, you can make this a lot nicer. Like for example, these are pretty basic samples. I mean, it's better to either try a different library out or get your own samples. Also better to put them locally as opposed to CDN. I was just using CDN to show you, but there's a lot of different things that we can tweak here, such as add more effects or change the actual, values for the synthesizers. But we can get into that in future videos. This is just a basic one, just so you can get started. Anyway, I will provide a link in the description, and feel free to comment and ask me any questions that you have.